Hey everybody, these are some of the mallets that I've made. As soon as I got my hands on a lathe, for some reason it seemed like every piece of wood I put in it became a mallet. I have made several one-piece mallets and I have made several two-piece mallets. And the ones I love the most to make are the ones like this. And this one's actually pretty big. This has an off-center turned handle, so it feels real similar to the handles that come on factory hammers. You can see it's elongated, and this is the one in the video we're going to be watching today. Decent ratio for the size of your mallet is between, say, 2 to 2.5 times that diameter in length. You can make this as long as you want. It's completely up to you when you're making yours. I mean, if you look at this one, that ratio is by far beyond that. So the thing you want to keep in mind is there's about the same amount of mass in both heads, okay? But since this one has so much more mass behind the striking surface, the momentum that this thing is going to provide in the smaller area is going to be a lot higher. 2 7/8 is the maximum diameter of a circle that I can get out of this piece of wood. So by the time I get it down and straight and flush and everything, I'm figuring on 2.5 to 2 3/4 in diameter for the head. That's gonna be somewhere between 6 1/4 and 7 inches. So what I'll do, I'll figure 7 because I can always take it down, and then I want to add minimum 1/2 inch to either side. I'm going to go ahead and do 1 inch to either side for waist. The ratio of your handle to the head, 1.5 to 2, would be comfortable. Longer is fine, but going to become more cumbersome over time. Our plan is to have a head on this mallet that's between 6 and 7. I'm going to go a full 2 times, which would be 14, plus the diameter of our head, which would be 17 when we're guessing. Then you add some, so 18. I'm going to go and cut this thing down to about 2 by 2. Alright, so when I was deciding on the length of the handle and measuring for the blank and all that, I totally forgot that my lathe isn't big enough to handle that kind of length. So I'm going to have to cut this a little shorter. Alright, so I played around with some live centers and drive centers, and the maximum I can fit in here is 16.5. So I've cut this down. We're going to take a look at the head of the mallet and decide on how big of a tenon or mortise we want to put in it. Half of your diameter is a decent starting point to think about. So what I normally do is I pull out the Forstner bits. 1 3/8 is real close to half. Close enough to half. And so I'll just eyeball this and decide whether I like it or not. And I feel like that gives me plenty of meat on both sides. I do not want to go through the side of the grain here. I want to see this. So right here. So somewhere in there is where that's going to go. Now I need to measure center this direction. And in order to keep the balance of the mallet, you do not want to measure from this ridge. come off the flat side. If it's rounded, you need to come from the point. If you're going to air toward the flat side and give the tiny bit more meat to the rounded side. Alright, I made it ugly, I'm committed. Alright, so how I normally do this is I just clamp it up in a screw clamp. And I've got waste blocks under it. Alright, so I'm just going to take a parting tool. I'm going to define this. Turn this around. Alright, we're within a couple thou all the way down. Let's see how we look. And I've got the grain of the handle running the same direction as the head, so that when we wedge it, I won't be wedging it along the grain, I'll be wedging it across the grain. And that should help prevent it from splitting down into the handle. And I'll do the same thing over here. So in order to make this as fluid as possible, you can do all your initial shoulder cuts with a small chisel. It should fall down into that scribe mark we made with the dividers. Just hit it real light. Alright, so I'm gonna turn the camera off and I'm gonna get to this. You get the gist of it. Alright, so this is where we are right now. Once I get that cleared out and I'm ready to start making sure I've got a nice tight fit, I'll be putting it on the same orientation every single time. I'm holding the chisel flat against the tenon right here. And then I'm just paring a little bit to smooth it out. Alright, those are at about the same level. I'll flip it over and do it again. Alright, so we're starting to get close. I've still got a larger gap here than I do over there. So at this point, what I start doing is I'll get up in here where it's touching and I'll mark it. Then I'll flip it over, mark the other side. It's not always dead in line, especially when you're doing all this stuff by hand. And that's where I'll remove material, and I need to be careful that I maintain an arc without changing where the tops of these are, until I get it down and get this resting flush all the way across. Alright, so here we are. And that is pretty good. It's still not dead on perfect, but it is good enough. Alright, so this can actually get a little bit trickier than it seems. So, our mallet head is running this direction, obviously. Okay? Which means that we want the long dimension of our handle running the same direction. Well, in order to pull that off, we have to offset in the opposite direction. This way. Alright, so this is about as far down as I'm going to take it. And I know this thing looks huge. But, I mean, this is really large in proportion to the head. But when you're offset turning, you need to start out with something way bigger than you think you need. hard to see with all the crap in there behind it. But there, it's slightly narrower here, little hump right here in the middle, and then one hand's width here before it tapers back out. Alright, so when you offset turn, you get a ridge. And if you got it even, that ridge should be pretty straight. This one's not perfectly straight. It's dang close though. Once this thing's sanded up, with it back in center, we're going to accentuate the taper here a little bit, come back out a little bit, come back in a little bit, flare back out. So we're going to try to make this offset stand out just a hair more and knock off the ridge. Oh, that's good and fat, fits my hand. That's about as close as I want to take it. Now, this is the point when normally when I'm making these with just using it in the shop in mind, I just crank up the belt sander and go to town, and I don't worry about all the scratches I put on the top, but I want this one to actually look pretty nice. All of a sudden, I don't mind the top being a little pillowed. God, I'm lazy. Alright, so I'm not going to make you watch the rest of this. I'll get the squeeze out around the tenon and the handle, sand it off so it's looking decent. And then, if I have a piece of leather big enough, I'll put that on the flat face. And then we can go with finish. So I'm going to use contact cement. And throw away acid brush. It's been about 15 minutes. And this is the case where being fat kind of helps. Get it so that... Okay. Now we just trim it off. Alright guys, we have leather face. Leather face, you like that? You see what I did there? Alright, I'm happy with it. Here's a little bit closer look. Thanks again for watching.